Today we are starting with new buildings in historic settings. Remember, in our last lectures we have talked about the delineated historic zones or historic areas which have a certain significant characteristics. Which also talked about that these areas, though it is designated historic area, but they have to be living areas, they are not museum cities. So, that means people will work there, they will stay there, some activities will go on, and obviously there will be some structures which need to be demolished or the open spaces are there. So, some of the new structures have to come up. Now, the question is that if an area is designated as a historic zone because of some significance and characteristics, then how these new buildings will come up in that area. Are there any guidelines? What are the guidelines then? How they will be designed? Whether they will be just an imitation of the old buildings, but the old buildings are also from various time periods of various styles it can be. So, this is the question and these are the examples we will see from some of the places, that whether it can be implemented through laws, bylaws, rules and regulations, or there can be some guidelines. So, this is the topic of today's discussion. Now, here we can see the two cities. One is from Kolkata, this one, the Kolkata from during the Second World War time, and this the Second World War time Kolkata is there, and it is one of the very busy street, the Chowrangi street, and the same street, not from the same location, we see it today, that multi-stories have come up. There are certain buildings which are old, which are probably listed as a heritage structures, but definitely the new high-rise structures have come up, and now if you go there, you will high structure, long apartment has come up, very high-rise apartment. Now, we see the Oxford Street, which was also a very busy commercial street in London in 1920 and 2010. Now, when we see 1920 and 2010, 2010 also some changes have done. So, probably you can see that this is a new building which has come up there. There also far away some new structures have come up in this area. And this is and they are also old buildings of a different nature, different height, but we do not see that the change what has happened in London is as drastic change as Kolkata one. Kolkata also there are some low rise building. No, so this is that if we have to make an historic area, historic spine or street into a living area, definitely there will be the new buildings. The question is that what will be the design of the new buildings, what will be the activities, how that. So, you can see that I think both of these are new buildings and they are not at all copy, they are very much of today's building, but they have the change is not drastic, that the change will definitely happen, but it is something there should be a dialogue between the old and the new structure. So, let us take some of the other examples also. Again London and Kolkata, the changing cityscape. So, as I told you in London that what is happening is that the new structure has come up there. So, this the new the new structure has come up there, and so you can see that you can make out that is a new structure, but it is not a copy or imitation of the old structure, but there is some sort of a harmony, some sort of a dialogue, continuity between the old and the new. And when you see Kolkata, this structure which has come up in the Chowrangi road only because of the metro station which has come up there, it sits very awkwardly within that historic cityscape. It may not be a beautiful cityscape, but there is a character of those apartment houses which are there. And this is also more drastic, that there is an old structure in this is not Chowrangi road, but in the Ganges, and there a new structure has come up which is totally sort of a disregarding the character of the old structure. So, this is something which probably is not desirable when we designated an area as a historic zone. Let us talk about some other cities in India. This is Shimpi Alipad in Pune. You can see that there are beautiful structures which are there, and not one, quite a few of them, but then behind some other structures which are coming up, which is actually nothing in common with this old structure. They are almost from at least two different worlds almost, and that is what, if this continues to happen and this old structure will be there, maybe if they are listed structure, but if there is no sort of a character of that structure for which it has been designated as a heritage zone, that character will be totally lost. And it is not only visual character what we are talking about, we are also talking about the activities there. For example, in Pune, this area, there are particular types of craftsmen, the copper craftsmen and other craftsmen which are there, and still they are there, and they are also important for those type of activities. The situation is always not so bad. This is like Fort Kochi, we have seen this earlier. This is a designated heritage zone, and as a result what we see is that that type of high rise structure, or what we see incompatibility or unsympathetic structures haven't come up. But still what we can see is that still this structure, there are a lot of overhead wires are there, all the structures are not in good condition. There probably is a scope for much improvement of that area, keeping the characteristics, and some sort of a development can come up. We see this is Ellsbury in York, and which is a very distinctly different from that, because here we can see the layers of structure. There are timber structures, there are the brick structures, there is sloping roof, there are the flat roof structures. There definitely is a shopping area, some of the residential area or hotels or the maybe there, but these has sort of kept the character, the layers of the historic character, and it is a very much sought after area. It is a commercially very viable area, and it has not only kept its own significance, but it also has been able to keep a mark of its own, a distinct identity of its own, and it continues to live, continues to develop, and continues to preserve also. So, this is something what is possible to be done, and because it has its own identity and characteristics changing, some of the changes are happening, but it becomes a very people like to go there. This has retained its identity, it is not similar with the other parts of the city. This slide is not so good, but it is a very good example of what we call new building in old city, in a city of Ellsbury in England. So, now we have to see that if we have to ensure that if a heritage zone has been delineated, and what will be the new buildings in that. I always said it can't be a copy, and copy of what, because it can be layers of different types of buildings can be there. So, that means we have to do some analysis, and that type of analysis should guide an architect, an innovative architect, creative architect to design something, a new structure which will handhold the old structure. This is a very good example of hand holding, because as you can see here that this is a timber frame structure, where this is a very well decorated structure there, which is a different color, different materials, and there is another structure which is not sloping roof, a brick structure there, which may not be the proportion, and everything is different, only the height has been maintained, and there a new building has come up which is belonging to this time, and this building is almost hand holding the two generation, almost like two friends from two sides, and this hand holding is what we are talking about. So, if you have to ensure that this happens, of course, the legalities are there, it has to be designated, some sort of a guidelines, bylaws have to be there, but more than that, what is required is to have an analytical mind and a creative mind and a sensitive mind, that what should be the new buildings in this whole setting. So, these are some of the points which help in the analysis of certain heritage zones. For example, crane, mass oblique plot width, building line, silhouette or skyline, color and texture, scale, visual density or fenestration. So, we will take up all these points, and it is not that all of these have to be followed. These are certain helping, it helps to analyze and see the existing structures, and then see that how the new structures can be designed. We will come back to this example later on. So, first one is the grain. So, we are saying filling the gap, the elements of townscape, they are designated as a special area. One of the reason definitely it has got a distinct townscape value. So, one first point is the grain. What is grain? It explains the texture of historic property with topography, morphology, built form, and it can be a coarse grain and it can be a fine grain. So, you can see that there are from the various towns I have taken that from Copenhagen or Paris or New York or San Francisco, Toronto or London or Mississippi. There are different types of grain. What is a grain? It sort of talks about the topography, it talks about the street pattern, whether regular, irregular, open spaces versus built form, the roofscape, everything comes within the grain, but basically it can be the coarse grain, fine grain, and it can be a different. It likes if you move your hand over the city or the built environment, how you feel like that. And that's you can see in these two, one is from Ahmedabad. This is from Ahmedabad. You can see that here the relationship of the open space to built form is very different, and here there is another town on a sloping topography. So, the proportion, the how the buildings are there is very different. So, the grain is one of the thing which can be analyzed, and that also gives a distinct. We do not look at the plan, but when you move in the city and other, it definitely will be felt that what is the grain type, and it can be has to be understood independently from each space or heritage zone. Second point is mass oblique plot width. That means, what is the sort of a frontage of the building, what is their scale, and again it may not be uniform because it might have changed over the years, but there is a certain character of the mass and plot width, and this becomes a very important tool for the process of amalgamating the new structure within the old structure. So, the first one is from Jyväskylä from Finland, and this is from Salisbury from York, you can UK. So, you can see that in this structure this city is a downtown area. There are the buildings from the old timber structure, then there is a brick building, and there are, but also what you can find out that if you see the frontage, the proportion of the frontage, this is sort of almost not much variation, and layers of history have been preserved there. And similarly here Jyväskylä, what you can see is one of the pedestrian street, and there you can see a new structure has come up and the new brick structures. Of course, the height is definitely have kept there, but you see that always the height is not uniform. For example, here in this case there is certain variation, but this variation is a part of the character of that area, and this can be maintained and new structures can come up there. And also we can see the different in the color and other thing, member that I will talk about another, there is another point in that. So, this is the point is the mass and or the plot width which is there. It continues, and this is a very interesting example. This is from the first one is from York, this is from York. This is from York. So, here you can, and this is from again Salisbury. Now, Salisbury case is very interesting. We have seen some of the pictures. Now, this entire structure is actually an apartment, and this apartment needs the parking area. So, what they have the parking area, but rather than the stilted, they are stilted partition, but they have given this basement or the ground floor parking, but they have not kept it open, and they have divided the entire facade into smaller segments to give an impression or to match with that smaller frontage mass and plot width, and that is why it sort of fits in well. Otherwise, it is actually a huge apartment block which has come up in that new building. And here also in New York you can see that the new structure, this is a new structure which has come up, and with the shopping area, and this also a new structure has come up. So, they have almost matching that proportion of the frontage, not only the proportion, it has also continued or retain the building line, what we call, that will come to the next one. So, this is very important, and that the new users, like in this particular case of Salisbury, the parking area has to be incorporated for the ground floor, and how it has been kept is that how it has been kept is a very what is called a very intelligent design or intelligent conservation for this area. So, and we have talked about the building line. What are the building lines? There are sort of a details on the different historic period. One can identify what are the major and the minor buildings line. There cannot be a predominant line, but one has to understand that which are these lines, and one can sort of start trying to find out these building lines, and then in a new structure it can be incorporated. And this is how the analysis goes for the building line. For example, this is from I think Hamilton in Canada. So, what you can see that one has to take the elevation first, a streetscape, what has happened there, and then one has to sort of find out that what are the different proportion of this, and then one has to keep this the major building blocks, and then one can take out that, and one is left with this type of a pattern or guiding lines, which can be, it does not mean it has to be a homogeneous one, it can be heterogeneous also, there can be a variation, but this type of analysis based on the total streetscape is possible to be done, and this is what is required when we are talking about the building block. This is the continuing with the building line. So, what we say that in this particular structure, we see that there are the major building lines, the horizontal stories, and on the top floor they are also subdivided into a smaller part into the vertical base. So, this has to be understood. So, you see that on the vertical base on the top floors there are certain smaller divisions which are happening there, and also that has to be integrated, and there in one street there can be a various types of that, and that lines and understanding of that how these building lines are there, major vertically, horizontally, major, minor, and how this is also changing, this just has to be understood first. Then comes the building setback. In many of the historic area, what happens is that the buildings actually form a sort of a continuous wall, there is no setback, and in this case also you see that there is no setback except in the ground floor. There is a point here that where there is a setback at the ground floor. This setback is there, and then it continues, and sometimes the building is there is a setback, some of the buildings are kept away from the front line, mandatory setback. Now, if a heritage zone has this type, a particular type of setback or no setback, or a combination of both, one has to understand that, because that has to be maintained, because these type of features or attributes contribute to the characteristics of that area. You may not follow, I mean you should not really copy the details, ornamentation and other, but if you just take these attributes and try to incorporate some of them, and it depends on the architects how it's done, then there is a continuity, there is a dialogue between the old and the new, and that is very important to understand. So, this gives a sort of a guidelines for this the building setback. There can be front setback, there can be side setback also. Silhouette and skyline, this is from Bhubaneswar, the old city of the Bhubaneswar. So, when you put that, the silhouette talks about basically the roof line, where we are not talking about color, we are not talking about texture at all, it just talk about that how the silhouette forms, and this is the skyline. This may be a continuous skyline, there can be the breaking of the skyline. So, this silhouette also gives a very important characteristic of a historic area. So, this is some of the studies what we say that we are not considering anything else, building lines, color, texture, we are just trying to see that how these roof lines have been formed. So, there are these different areas where you can see that sometimes it can be discontinuous, sometimes there will be interspersed with spheres, sometimes there will be in many cases it can be just a continuous line. So, one has to understand the silhouette and skyline, what is the characteristic. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that if there are domes and towers and all these things, we copy that thing? No. There can be again that how we can in the modern design, how we can try to incorporate this breaking or this rhythm or this form, but functionally how we can incorporate there is also a lot of possibilities, and that has to come from the designer himself. Another thing is the scale. When we talk scale and proportion, one is related to the human dimension and another is its own scale. For example, if you see the Ellsbury in North Carolina here, that most of the buildings here, they are forming a sort of a group, very strong group, and certainly this building has come up there which is totally breaking and it is totally out of scale, and it is in some areas this itself can be a character, but here probably it seems like it is an sort of really an intervention, not a very happy intervention in that area. Now, but suppose we say that if they are two-storied or lower story, do we have to follow that, the lower story, can't we have the more floor area ratio? So, let us say this is, I am not saying an ideal example in this case, but here you see what has happened is from the floor, the road level one, if you can look at that, and it has also broken the huge mass into parts, and there behind with a setback the high rise structures are there. So, actually when you are walking along the street level you do not see that high rise, but it has been able to create that more floor area behind and taking the scale of the building same. So, scale can be done by the height, scale can be done by the relationship between the internals, so what has been done, and some of the features also were kept. So, scale is a very important part of this type of attribute when we are talking about the historic areas. Color and the texture. Many of the old structures were built with brick or stone masonry and with a different types of detail. It does not mean that we have to follow that, we can have the modern material, but to see some sort of if there is a harmony, there is an uniform character, and most of the buildings were made with a particular type of tone and their texture, or then it can be followed. This is an example of Oxford, which is, as you know, at an university city, and there a lot of new addition extensions are required, and here you can see that it is done with the modern material, but some a little bit of features and some sort of a rustication, some sort of a color has been incorporated there to harmonize between the old and the new structure. So, the color and texture is also very important part. We do not have to always take the old details or imitate the old details or old structure. In the some details, some ornamentation, some sort of a rustication, it can happen to match, to sort of establish a harmony between the old and the new. Again, so visual density and fenestration, this is also important because I am again bringing that the old structure, and visual density and penetration comes from the type of details and ornamentation and the opening size and the proportion of the opening size, grouping of the opening size, and how and the sometimes ornamentations were also there. So, these also becomes a very important part. So, let us look at that example from this Ellsbury. So, I said that this structure is hand holding between the two. Now, it has a very, on one side it has a huge timber frame structure which is a dark color with a lot of ornamentation, and another side it is a brick one which is a very simple one. So, what it has done is that this is a plain facade and this is a decorated and other thing. What it has taken a middle path. So, what it has done, rather than a flat thing, it has done some sort of a projection, and this color of the details, it is not an ornamentation, but how it has done the facade, the projection and the recession, it gives a sort of a character which matches. It is not a replication of that, it is gives some sort of a detailing, some sort of an ornamentation with this old structure. But again you see that the roof line has been maintained, the building line has been maintained this way, and the material wise for some it has looked towards this, and some other it has looked towards that, and that is why it is able to handhold that. It is neither to the, and it is a new structure, it belongs to today's time, and that is very important. And then we can also talk about this one. I would say that this is actually not this one, that how we see the openings and how the openings are grouped together. And definitely what is also important, many of such areas are being converted into the shopping areas, commercial areas, and they need a huge display window, and that actually sometimes break that. So, if you have to have the display window, then also one has to see that within the display window how sort of a breaking the scale can be maintained. The signage system is very important. There is some regulation restriction of the signage system. This is very important when we are talking about the these historic areas. So, this is what we call the visual density. Visual density is that how much are details within there, whether they are plain facade, other, and how we can combine these two. So, these are broadly the elements of townscape. So, we can see that how this is an area near the St. Paul's Cathedral in London, which is an heritage area, very important area, very busy area, and it is a lot of market value. But here also we can see that there is not the form of the cathedral, it has been maintained, it has not been sort of unobstructed by the other high rise structures. But within that we can see that new structures have come up. The new structures have come up with very interesting detail, which is a different types of ornamentation, which has its own language, but that language is definitely not same as this one, but it is not very not very drastically different from that one. So, that is very important. And then so we still have in India many parts of in India very beautiful areas, like this is from Dorjipada in North Calcutta. I mean, they are all there and they have a particular significant character, beautiful characters, and without any setback, particular types of details. It has been grown because of a particular period of the history, and these are the areas which need to be designated as a heritage zone with special bylaws. And remember, the bylaws is only not enough. These type of understanding or analysis of the townscape under the different aspects needs to be done if some new building has to come in that area, so that it can have some sort of a sympathetic, and it can handhold. There is a hand holding between the old and the new. And there are so many ways. I am again bringing that the glass is a very important feature, because many of the areas the glass, and then how you use the glass, what type of glass, like in this is again the St. Paul's Cathedral here, that where the glass actually reflects the old structure. So, it is a reflective glass, and this also is a very again intelligent way of creating the character. This I have already discussed, the glass is there, but the glass now becomes a sort of a background, and which highlights the historical facade. And these are sort of a clever ways of how you, and nobody can dictate that just by bylaws. Bylaws needed to be there, but this has to be discussed. This has to have a strong heritage committee and a review committee, which will see, and with the present simulation techniques, all this can be tried before it is built or before it is approved. So, we are talking about the elements of landscape and actually a dialogue between the old and the new, and so there are various examples. These I have already talked about, and these dialogue between the old and the new, this is from Finland, Jyväskylä, and this is where we can see that this is a very interesting structure, which the turret with the turret which is there, very interesting structure, and with a very ornate brick things, and you can see the new buildings have come up, another new building has come up. Now, this building, this again is very ornamental in its own way, and it is having, as I say, should say, a dialogue between the old. One ornamental building is talking with the other ornamental building, and it is possible, it is one of the, it's the downtown area, and this is possible because the use of the color, how it has done, it has making its own statement. This is very interesting again, it is from I think it's Hamilton in Canada, and where there are the old structures, these are the old structures, and here the new structures have come up, and how they have very intelligently combined the red brick facade with the concrete structures. Is broken, it is not just one huge facade, they have broken the scale and used the detailing in such a way that it has its own way of complementing with the old structure. So, again I am saying this filling the gap, the elements of landscape, we have to need this type of analysis to see that how this can happen and how we can analyze that, and then I say the bylaws has to be there, the designation has to be there, but this analysis of townscape elements, so that in today's time one can contribute, so that that hand holding is there and the elements of townscape. As I say, there should be a strong bylaws, yes, incentives should also be there, and the change of use can also happen, but this analysis depends on the individual architect, but approval of that also has to go through a proper review committee. A strong instrument should be in place, a process should be there in place to see that which is possible and which is not possible, and with some special bylaws for that area. So, we will continue with this elements of townscape, that how the heritage impact assessment when a certain new structures are coming up, how the what should be the way to do the heritage impact assessment in such an heritage zone, and getting the guidelines from the old structure, again contributing in the contemporary time, in the contemporary language. So, we will continue with that with the next lecture. Thank you.